Activists and shareholders are finding success in affecting change on corporate boards. That's just one of the findings in PwC's annual Corporate Directors Survey. I'm joined by Paula Loop, leader of PwC's Governance Insight Center. Nice to see you again, Paula.
Hi, nice to see you.
So how has the growth of activism and increased shareholder engagement really affected change on the boards in terms of not just composition, but also capital allocation?
So we did see a couple of different elements in this survey where investors are really getting their points across. So specifically in capital allocation, board members told us that 48% of them said that they had changed their capital allocation strategy, increased their share buybacks, either approved or increased dividends over a third of the time. So I think that's a lot of influence.
It is. I thought it was interesting too. The survey found that some directors, 21%, don't think engaging with investors matters. So that was intriguing too.
Yeah, we asked the question this year about the whole effort of engaging with investors. How's it going? How does it work? What's happening? A couple of things came back. One, you're right, they didn't think that the effort was worthwhile. Two, some of them said they didn't feel that the investors even had the right people in the room for the conversation. They weren't well prepared for the conversation. And then around 40% of them said two things. One, they're not sure it really impacted proxy voting, and they're not sure it really impacted investor decisions going forward. So I think there's some work to do on both sides there.
Yeah, a little bit of an oxymoron
in
terms of affecting change and whether or not it matters. One issue when we talk about corporate boards, we always come back to, and that is diversity. Where are we now in terms of diversity? Are we seeing improvement?
So we did see some interesting nuggets, I think, in this survey. One, we saw that investors are continuing to influence board composition. We saw that when boards are thinking about nominating new directors, almost 20% of them took advice and input from investors. So that was an interesting data point. They also told us about almost 2/3 of them said that they made changes to board composition to add diversity. So that was another great data point. But then we said, okay, at the end of the day, where do we want to go here? What's the ultimate makeup, do you think, of your board? Should it be, from 40 to 50% of them should be female? And they said about 40% of people said yes. And then about another 40% said yes, the board should be made up of 20 to 40% female. But interestingly enough, 10% of board members said, we like it just the way it is, 0 to 20%. We don't need any more female out there.
And you also found in this survey that the search for new directors is pretty narrow. So you think of kind of like the golf buddies that go out and somebody's buddy with another one. So that's a little discouraging too, that in terms of looking for more board members, it's a pretty small search.
Yeah. I think we asked them, do you think that there's capable, diverse board candidates out there? Not surprisingly, women unanimously said yes. We do think there's capable, diverse board members candidates out there, but the men not so much.
Paula, how does this compare to previous surveys? What stood out most to you? And for shareholders, should they feel confident that boards are doing their job?
I think the one thing that really stood out is, again, the listening factor. So I think that throughout the survey, whether it was around diversity, board composition, even engaging with shareholders, and even the topic of capital allocation that we mentioned, you definitely get the sense that board members are listening to investors. And even the activism is having an impact on what they're doing in the boardroom. So I think that's a really positive thing. One of the other things that was kind of interesting to us is for 5 years in a row, about a third of directors said that they think somebody on their board should be replaced. So it's a little surprising that number is always constant. It's always somewhere in the 30% range. And then we asked again, as a follow-up, we said, okay, well, what are you doing around self-assessments for performance of the board? When you assess how you're doing as a board, as a committee, or individual board member performance, are you doing anything? And almost 50% of them said, actually, we did our assessments, but we didn't make any changes this year. So again, that's not really hanging together.
Well, we'll see how it looks in next year's survey. Paula Loop, thanks for sharing the results.
Thank you.
I'm Rhonda Schaffler for The Street.